She was the doctor at the prison clinic, calm, professional, invisible to most. He was the most dangerous inmate in the building. For 5 days straight, he showed up to her clinic bleeding. A different injury every time. The guards were suspicious. She was confused. He was just finding the only way he knew to see her face. On the day he was released, he didn't send a message, didn't wait, didn't ask. He walked into the yard, put her on his back, and walked out the gate. She objected the entire way. He didn't stop once. Welcome to our channel. Tell us in the comments where you are listening from today. The Harrow Falls Correctional Facility sat at the edge of the Oregon woods like a stone fist pressed into the earth. Dr. Lena Voss had worked there for 3 years, and she had long since learned to move through it like water, quiet, unremarkable, careful not to catch on anything sharp. She was not a small woman, but she had mastered the art of taking up very little space. Brown hair pulled back without vanity. White coat that said, "I am here to help," and nothing else. She did not raise her voice. She did not flinch at scars. She had sutured knife wounds, treated withdrawal symptoms, and once calmly set a man's broken jaw while he called her every name she had ever been told nice girls did not hear. She had never been afraid inside those walls. Until Block 7. The prisoners in Block 7 were not classified by crime alone. They were classified by something the administration called containment complexity. Lena called it what it was: the men no other facility would keep. 17 inmates, each one a story she was not paid to read. The name that came up in guard conversations, always whispered, never written on a board, was Dorian Vex. She had never treated him. In 3 years, he had not once come to the clinic. She knew his file the way she knew all of them: height, weight, blood type, known allergies. What the file did not explain was why 4 guards went pale when his name was mentioned, or why the warden had pulled her aside in her first week and said quietly that if inmate Vex ever requested medical attention, she was to call for backup before entering the room. She had filed that instruction under things I will reassess if it ever becomes relevant. It became relevant on a Tuesday in November. The guard who brought him in, a broad man named Torres, who had once laughed through a riot, was visibly sweating. Dorian Vex walked beside him like a man on a stroll, not like a man with a forearm wrapped in a strip of his own shirt that had soaked completely through with blood. Lena looked up from her desk. The file had not prepared her. He was large, not in the exaggerated way of men who spent every hour in a prison yard, but in the way of something built rather than trained. 6'3", she would guess, with the kind of proportions that made a room feel smaller. Dark hair, slightly overgrown, pushed back from a face that was, and she catalogued this with the detached precision of a clinician, extraordinarily structured. High jaw, deep-set eyes, a mouth that seemed designed in this moment to be very still. He looked at her. The eyes were what stopped her breath. She had seen amber eyes before. Light brown, hazel, the human range was wide. But these were the color of a lit match at its peak, and they were fixed on her with an attention that felt less like a look and more like a recognition. Lena set down her pen. "Inmate Vex, I'm Dr. Voss. Let me see the arm." He said nothing. He crossed the room in 4 steps and sat in the examination chair with the careful ease of a man who had decided to let this happen, and she understood, without knowing why, that the decision was entirely his. She snapped on gloves, unwrapped the makeshift bandage, a laceration, deep but clean, along the outer forearm. She did not ask how it happened. She reached for the wound to assess depth. His hand closed around her wrist. Not rough, not threatening exactly, just there, certain, as though the contact was the point. She looked up. His face was inches from hers. The amber eyes were very bright. "You're going to want to let go of my wrist," she said, "so I can do my job." Something moved through his expression, something she could not name and was not sure she wanted to. He released her. But he did not lean back. He stayed exactly where he was, watching her work with an attention so complete it felt like pressure against her skin. When she pressed the edges of the wound to check for debris, a muscle in his jaw moved, not from pain. She would have recognized pain. This was something else. She sutured quickly, efficiently, without looking up again. When she reached for the bandage, his free hand came up, not touching her, just near, and she went very still. 3 days, he said. It was the first word he had spoken. His voice was low, with a texture that reminded her of something she could not immediately place. "I'm out in 3 days." She looked at him then. He was looking at her like she was the only fixed point in a room that was spinning. "That's," she started. "Relevant," he said, and the corner of his mouth moved in something that was not quite a smile, but was related to one. Torres cleared his throat loudly from the doorway. Lena finished the bandage, stepped back, wrote up the chart in the same calm, competent handwriting she always used. "Keep it dry for 48 hours. Come back if it shows signs of infection." She looked at him directly. "You won't be back in 3 days, so follow the instructions." He stood. He was very close. "Dr. Voss," he said, like he was tasting the name. She held his gaze without blinking. He turned and walked out. Torres gave her a look she could not read. She turned back to her desk. Her hands, she noticed, were perfectly steady. The rest of her was not. That night, in the small house she rented at the edge of Harrow Falls, Lena sat at her kitchen table for 20 minutes without making the tea she had intended to make. She had no framework for what she had felt in that room. No clinical vocabulary, only the stubborn, irrational certainty that those amber eyes had looked at her like she was something he had been looking for a very long time. She was a doctor. She believed in evidence. She could not explain the evidence of her own heartbeat. The next morning, she arrived at the clinic at 7, as always, unlocked the door, started the kettle, and opened her first chart. At 7:18, Torres was back at her door. "Inmate Vex again," he said, his voice carrying a note of profound resignation. "Knuckles this time." Lena looked up slowly. "Yesterday he punched a wall," Torres continued. "We think." She set down the chart. "Send him in." By Thursday, Lena had stopped asking how the injuries happened. She told herself this was clinical pragmatism. She had patients who found ways to get hurt that were more complicated than they appeared. She documented what she saw, treated what she could, and referred what she could not. That was the job. What the job did not include was the way Dorian Vex looked at her when she touched him. He came every day. A split above the left brow on Wednesday, a bruised rib on Thursday. He had fallen, according to the incident report, which no one who filed it appeared to believe. By Friday, even Torres had stopped offering explanations. "He's choosing this," Torres said quietly, when Dorian had been escorted back to Block 7. "I don't know why, Doc, but he's choosing every one of these visits." Lena thought about that for a long time after the last patient of the day. She thought about the way he sat in the examination chair, never resisting, never aggravating, perfectly still under her hands, with that expression she had been cataloguing and still could not name. It was not performance. It was not manipulation, at least not the kind she had learned to identify. It was something rawer than that. When she pressed a cold pack to his brow on Wednesday, his eyes had closed for just a moment, like a man allowing himself one small relief. She had not let herself think about that. She thought about it now. 2 days before his release, she arrived at the clinic to find him already there. Torres had not brought him. He was sitting on the bench outside her door, with his back straight and his large hands resting open on his knees, like a man who had waited a long time and had made peace with waiting. "You don't have an appointment," she said. "I know." She unlocked the door. After a moment she held it open. He came in without being asked, sat in the chair, looked at her with those unreasonable amber eyes. "Show me," she said. He held out both forearms. Nothing new. The previous sutures were clean, healing well. He had followed her instructions. She checked the wound from Tuesday, almost without thinking, running her gloved fingertips along the closure. He was very still under her hands, still in the way of something that had decided to be. "You're healing correctly," she said. "Yes." She set his arm down, stepped back, crossed her own arms. "Mr. Vex, I'm a doctor, not a counselor, but I've been watching you hurt yourself for 5 days in a row, and I have a clinical obligation to ask. Are you all right?" Something shifted in his expression. Not pain. The opposite of pain. "I'm better than I've been in a long time," he said. She studied him. "That answer concerns me more than a straightforward no would have." "It shouldn't." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not trying to harm myself, Dr. Voss. I know that's what this looks like. It isn't." "Then what is it?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing words with unusual precision. "There are things happening to me that I don't expect you to understand, things I don't fully have language for in this context." His eyes moved across her face. "But I'm not in distress. I'm the furthest from distress I've been in years." She did not move. "That's not a reassuring statement when it's accompanied by daily lacerations." His mouth did the almost smile again. "No, I don't imagine it is. You said 2 days ago that you're released in 3 days. That means you're out tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "Good." She turned to her chart. "Then I'd like you to stop injuring yourself between now and then. I'll note in your file that wounds are healing, no signs of infection. You'll be cleared for release." She wrote without looking up. She was aware, with the precision of someone who had spent years learning her own physiological responses, that her heartbeat was not behaving normally. "Dr. Voss." She looked up. He had stood from the chair. He was very close, not threateningly, but in the way of something large that has learned to be careful about its own size around things that matter. "I know this has been irregular," he said. "I know you've been professional about it. I know you've treated me the way you'd treat any patient. That's my job. I know." A pause. "And I know you don't have any reason to believe anything I could tell you right now, so I won't tell you. I'll just see you tomorrow, Dr. Voss, in a different context." She stared at him. "I don't think that's... I'll be released at 9 a.m., he said. He reached the door, turned back once. Those eyes, lit and fixed and certain. "I know where this clinic is. I've known for 3 years. He left. Lena stood in her empty clinic for a long time. In Block 7, Dorian Vex sat on the edge of his cot in the dark and breathed carefully through a feeling that had been building for 5 days and was now nearly unbearable. He had known about mate bonds since he was 12 years old. He had spent 31 years not feeling one and had, quietly, made his peace with the possibility that it would never come. Then a woman with brown hair and calm hands had pressed her fingers to his forearm and the whole world had rearranged itself. He had 2 days. 1 to get out. 1 to figure out how to approach a woman who had no idea what she was to him, no frame of reference for what he was, and very good reasons to keep her professional distance. What he could not afford was letting Rogue Callahan, 3 cells down, watching with those calculating steel eyes, figure out what she meant to him before Dorian was clear of these walls. He had noticed Callahan watching the clinic door on Thursday. That was a problem he would need to solve tomorrow. Rogue Callahan had been in Harrow Falls for 14 months, and in that time he had learned 2 things about Dorian Vex. The man never broke routine, and the man never showed interest in anything. Until now. Callahan was not a fool. He had risen to the top of the Eastridge Pack by reading people, by finding the gaps in their armor and pressing until something gave. He was lean and pale, with grey eyes that missed very little, and he had been watching Dorian's daily trips to the clinic with the focused attention of a man assembling a useful fact. By Thursday, he knew. He did not know exactly what the doctor was to Dorian: bond, obsession, leverage, but he knew she was something. The way Vex's whole body shifted when someone mentioned her wing of the building. The way a man who had spent years making himself unreadable had stopped briefly being unreadable. Callahan was being released in 11 days. He had time. He requested a medical appointment on Friday afternoon, citing a persistent headache. The guard who escorted him brought him to the clinic door at 2 in the afternoon. Dr. Voss looked up from her desk. Callahan watched her eyes calibrate him in about 3 seconds. Patient, male, not an immediate threat. Assessment ongoing. She was good. Most civilians could not do it that fast. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "headache?" "Started Wednesday," he said pleasantly, taking the chair. "Behind the left eye. Could be tension, could be something worth checking." She ran the standard assessment. Professional, thorough, unhurried. "Your pressure is slightly elevated," she said. "Are you sleeping?" "Poorly." He watched her write. "It's a noisy block." A pause, timed carefully. "I imagine you hear more about Block 7 than you'd like." She did not look up. "I don't discuss other patients." "Of course not." He smiled. She was not going to give him anything directly. That was fine. He had already gotten what he came for. She had gone still for half a second when he mentioned Block 7. Not fear. Callahan could identify fear from a distance, something more like caution, self-awareness, the specific stillness of someone controlling a response they did not want to show. He left with a prescription for ibuprofen and the confirmed knowledge that Dorian Vex's doctor was aware of Dorian Vex in a way that went beyond clinical documentation. He filed it away. In Block 7, Dorian was on his feet the moment he heard Callahan come back through the door. Callahan walked past without looking at him, but his shoulder angle was wrong. The small, self-satisfied wrongness of a man who had just confirmed something. Dorian stood in the center of his cell and felt the thing that lived in him rise, not in anger, not yet, but in the cold, controlled way of something that had decided a line had been crossed. The wolf in him was not violent by nature. It was territorial. There was a significant difference. 3 more rooms down, Callahan sat on his cot and stared at the ceiling. 11 days. He could be patient too. The afternoon of Dorian's release arrived with the particular quality of Oregon light in November, low and golden, the kind that turned even concrete into something that looked almost warm. Lena had not planned to be in the yard. She had planned, in fact, to be in her office with the door closed, processing labs, behaving with complete professionalism about the fact that inmate Vex was being released at 3 p.m., and she had no reason whatsoever to be anywhere near the release corridor. She was in the yard because a patient in the general population had reported chest discomfort during afternoon exercise, and she was a doctor, and that was her job. She told herself this several times. The chest discomfort turned out to be anxiety, well managed and discharged in under 10 minutes. She was writing up the note on her tablet when she heard it. A shift in the yard's ambient noise, the specific recalibration of a crowd that has noticed something. She looked up. He was crossing the yard. He'd been processed through the release corridor and had, for reasons she did not immediately understand, been routed through the exercise yard rather than directly to the front gate. He was wearing civilian clothes for the first time. Dark jeans, a black leather jacket, his own things. And the difference between the man in the clinic chair and the man walking across that yard in his own clothes was significant enough that several inmates who had been mid-conversation simply stopped talking. He was taller than she remembered. That was the first thought. The second was that the late afternoon light caught his eyes from 30 feet away and turned them exactly the color she had been trying not to think about for 5 days. He was looking at her. He had been looking at her since the moment he cleared the door. Around the yard, the men in orange began to notice. Someone said something low and appreciative. A few of them started drifting closer with the casual, unconvincing indirection of people who want to watch something happen. Lena put her tablet under her arm and stood her ground. She was a professional. She had treated this man 8 times in 5 days. She had signed his medical clearance. This was a release. It was routine, and she was going to nod at him like a competent adult and go back to her office. He stopped in front of her, very close. The amber eyes were very bright in the golden light. "Dr. Voss," he said. "Mr. Vex," she said, perfectly level. "Congratulations on your release. Remember to keep the sutures dry for another 48 hours. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. I will." "Good." She took one step to the side to let him pass. He did not move. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to know that whatever you answer, I'll respect it." She looked up at him. "All right. Come with me." The yard had gone very quiet. 30 men in orange who had been pretending not to watch were no longer pretending. "I have 4 more hours on my shift," she said. "I know. I have patience. I know that too." She held his gaze. Everything she had spent 5 days carefully not feeling was standing right in front of her, wearing a black leather jacket, and his eyes were the color of something ancient and certain, and the bond she had been calling stress response was pulling at her sternum like a hand. "I can't just leave," she said. "You can," he said quietly. "You don't want to. That's different." Behind him, somewhere in the watching crowd, someone let out a low sound of appreciation. Someone else laughed. Lena took a breath. She was a scientist. She believed in evidence. The evidence currently in front of her was a man looking at her like she was the only thing in a very large yard, and her own heart doing something completely outside her clinical training. "This is extremely unprofessional," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "I want the record to show that I object to the method." "Noted," he said, and the next thing she knew, his hands were at her waist and she was airborne. She had exactly half a second to register what was happening before she was on his back. Her legs hooked over his forearms, her hands gripping the collar of his jacket, and Dorian Vex was walking calmly toward the yard gate, as though he had simply picked up something that belonged to him. The yard erupted. Laughter, shouting, someone clapping. The men in orange lost all pretense of composure entirely. Lena could hear Torres somewhere behind her, making a sound that was either protest or suppressed laughter, possibly both. "Put me down," she said, with complete, dignified authority. "No," he said pleasantly. "Dorian." "Lena. I am a medical professional. I know. You can go back to being one tomorrow." He kept walking. The gate was ahead of them, the Oregon forest dark and green behind the chain-link fence, the late afternoon light turning everything gold. "Tonight, I would like you to have coffee with me and let me explain some things." She tightened her grip on his jacket. Her tablet was still under one arm, which she felt said something significant about her composure. Behind them, the laughter had not stopped. She was fairly certain it would not stop for some time. "This is kidnapping," she informed him. "It's a piggyback ride," he said. "There's a legal distinction." She pressed her mouth together very hard to keep what was happening to her face from becoming visible. The gate opened in front of them. The golden light was everywhere. His shoulders were very steady under her hands, and he moved with the particular certainty of someone who has made a decision and is at complete peace with it. "Fine," she said when they crossed the threshold. "Coffee. 1 hour." 1 hour, he agreed. Behind them, The yard was still laughing. She stayed 3 days. His house smelled like pine and wood smoke, and something underneath she could not name, warm, faintly wild, entirely unlike anything she had smelled before. She walked in and catalogued it the way she catalogued everything. 4 rooms visible from the entry, good bones, lived-in furniture chosen for durability over appearance, books on shelves, no photographs. He made coffee, real coffee, with a grinder and a deliberate process, and he did not talk while he made it. And she found to her own mild surprise that the silence was not uncomfortable. She sat at the kitchen island. He set a mug in front of her, sat across. "Tell me who you are," she said. He looked at her steadily. "What do you already know?" "Your file. Public record, arrest, conviction, the things the state writes down." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "Nothing that explains the last week." No," he agreed. "It wouldn't." He was quiet for a moment, choosing carefully. "My name is Dorian Vex. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in these woods about 40 miles north of here. I run a small security company, or I did before I was unavailable for 3 years." A pause. "I'm also the alpha of the Harrow Pack, which is something most people have no framework for, and I want you to know I understand that." She looked at him. "Alpha, pack leader, of a group of people who are not entirely what most people understand humans to be." She was quiet for a long moment. "You're going to tell me something that's going to require me to significantly revise my model of the world." "Yes." "All right." She took a sip of coffee. It was very good. "Go ahead." He told her. He was not dramatic about it. He told her the way she gave diagnoses, clearly, precisely, without softening the parts that were hard. He told her about the pack, about what they were, about the transformation and the bond and the way packs were structured. He told her about the mate bond with the directness of a man who had decided that honesty was the only viable path. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. "Show me," she said. He blinked. For the first time, something surprised him. "What?" "Show me. You're telling me something that requires me to reassemble my entire understanding of biology. I'm a scientist. I need evidence." He looked at her for a long moment. Then his eyes changed. The amber shifted, deepened, lit from somewhere inside with a light that had nothing to do with the kitchen overhead. Not threatening, not animalistic in the way she would have expected. It was like watching something ancient and certain surface through water. Then they were amber again. She exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay." "Okay," he repeated carefully. "That's real." She turned her coffee mug a quarter turn. "And the mate bond, you felt it when I touched you?" "The first time you touched my arm," he said. "Yes. And She stopped, thought. "I felt something. I've been telling myself it was stress response." "It wasn't." "No," she said quietly. "I know it wasn't." He was watching her with a careful stillness, the same stillness she had seen in the clinic. "I'm not expecting anything from you," he said. "I want to be clear about that. You didn't choose this. You didn't know what you were walking into. The bond is real, and it's ours, but it doesn't obligate you. You're not a wolf. The bond doesn't compel you the way it compels me." She looked at him directly. "How does it compel you?" A breath. "I've thought about you every hour for 5 days. I hurt myself to see you, which is not something I would typically do or endorse." The smallest self-aware flicker. "You are the first person who has ever made my wolf still. It runs constant under everything. When you touched me, it went quiet, like something in me recognized you and settled." She was quiet. Outside, the forest moved in the early morning wind. "When you look at me," she started, then stopped because the word was wrong. She tried again. "When you look at me, I feel located. I don't have a better clinical term for it. I've been a very self-sufficient person my entire adult life, and in 5 days of you looking at me, I have felt located in a way I haven't felt since I was a child." He said nothing. He was looking at her like she had just given him something very precious. "I'm not saying I believe everything yet," she said. "I'm not saying I know what this is or where it goes. I'm saying I came here at 5 in the morning because the alternative was lying awake for another night pretending I didn't know I was going to." She met his eyes. "So, what do we do with that?" He moved, very slowly and with great intention, around the island. He stopped with perhaps 6 inches between them, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "We could start," he said, "with me not watching you from across a secured room." She looked up at him. He was very large and very careful, and his eyes were the most honest thing she had ever looked at. "That seems like a reasonable starting point," she said. He raised one hand, touched her jaw with just his fingertips, the light gesture of someone not taking but asking. She felt it everywhere. The bond she had been calling stress response flared like a struck match. She put her hand flat against his chest, not pushing away, measuring, feeling the steady thunder of a heart that was working very hard to be calm. "Dorian," she said. "Lena," he said back, with the same weight, the same care. She tilted her face up. He kissed her very gently, very deliberately, with the restraint of someone who had been waiting a very long time and had decided he could wait a little longer if she needed him to. She kissed him back, and the restraint lasted about 10 seconds. When they finally separated, the kitchen was very bright, and the forest outside was fully lit with morning, and Lena was gripping his shirt in both hands without fully remembering deciding to. "Stay," he said. It was not a command. It was a request. "For the day, for however long you want, I have things I want to tell you. Things I want to show you." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I want you to know this place. I want you to know me." She thought about her schedule, her charts, her carefully ordered life. "I'll stay today," she said. He smiled, a full smile, the first she had ever seen, and it did something very significant to the architecture of her chest. She stayed 3 days. The first day she learned his house. The second day she learned his silences, the comfortable ones, the thinking ones, the rare charged ones when he was holding something back. She was good at silences. She had spent years inside her own. The third day she went into the forest. She had not asked permission. The woods began 30 feet past the back of the house, and she had spent the morning watching them through the kitchen window while he made breakfast and talked to her in the low, even voice she had started to listen for without noticing she was doing it. After breakfast, she put on her coat and went out. The forest in November was cold and layered and very old. She knew Pacific Northwest forests from childhood. Her mother had taken her hiking every summer, and she carried that knowledge in her body the way she carried everything important, quietly, reliably. She knew what birdsong meant here. She knew the difference between safe soil and unstable ground. She was a careful person. She did not see the web. It stretched between 2 low ferns at ankle height, nearly invisible against the dark soil. A black widow's web, fine and perfect, and she was past it when her ankle caught it, and the spider, disturbed and defensive, was already moving when she looked down. The bite was brief, a sharp heat at the inner ankle, there and gone. She stood very still and looked at the ground and thought, assess. She had been bitten by a Latrodectus. She knew the presentation, the spreading heat, the coming systemic response. She was 45 minutes from the nearest hospital by her own car. She was 100 yards from Dorian's house. She was also a physician, and she understood the timeline clearly. She turned and walked back through the trees, quickly, without running, because running would accelerate her heart rate, and she needed to be clear for the next several minutes. She came through the back door and said, I need you to know I've been bitten by something, and I need to tell you the clinical picture before I potentially can't." He was on his feet before she finished the sentence. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, dropped to one knee in front of her, and had her ankle in his hands before she had finished sitting down on the floor, because her legs had informed her they were no longer reliable. "Show me." His voice was very controlled. His hands were not. She showed him. The small mark, the spreading flush. She gave him the clinical information, in the order it mattered: species, her weight, her heart rate, the nearest hospital, her allergy history. He listened to all of it. He was looking at the bite, and then at her face, and his expression was something she had never seen before. Not panic, but something under panic, held down by extraordinary force. "There's an anti-venom protocol," she said. "If we leave now—" "Lena." His voice. "The hospital is too far." She looked at him. He was looking at her with those eyes, and something in her very organized, very evidence-based mind registered that he was frightened, not of the situation, but of something inside himself, of a decision he was being forced toward. "Tell me," she said. "I can." He stopped, started again. "A bite from an alpha turns a human. It's irreversible. It would save you." His jaw was tight. "I have never done this without consent. That's not something I would do." "But Lena, you need to tell me right now because the window is—" "Do it," she said. He went completely still. "I'm a physician," she said, her voice steady, even as the heat climbed her calf. "I understand the medical situation. I understand what you're telling me. I'm giving you consent." She met his eyes. "I trust you. Do it." He held her gaze for one long, searching moment. Then he lowered his head, and she felt the pressure of his teeth at her shoulder. Careful, deliberate, nothing like the instinctive act it could have been. And then a warmth that was entirely different from the spider's venom. Not heat, not pain. Something that moved through her like music, like recognition, like every locked door she had ever walked past opening all at once. She grabbed his arm and held on. He gathered her against his chest and held her while it moved through her, and she heard him say her name against her hair, not once but several times, the way a person says something they need to keep being true. She lost consciousness briefly. When she came back, she was in his bed, and the light had changed, and Dorian was sitting beside her, with his elbows on his knees and his head bowed. And she understood from the set of his shoulders that he had been sitting exactly like that for a long time. "Hey," she said. He looked up. His eyes were very bright. "I'm all right," she said. "I know." His voice was rough. "I know you are. I just—" He stopped. She sat up slowly. Everything was different, not her thoughts, not herself, but the quality of the world, the way it pressed on her senses. She could hear the forest. She could hear his heartbeat. She could feel the bond like a living thing between them, completed and real and enormous. "Oh," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. "You saved my life," she said. "You gave me permission to." "That's not," she shook her head. "That's not a small thing what you did. You were going to let me," she stopped, started again. "You were going to let me die rather than do it without consent." His jaw was very tight. "Yes." She looked at him for a long time. "Dorian." "Lena." She moved across the bed, put her arms around him. He went very still for a moment, the stillness of a man not entirely sure what is being offered, and then his arms came around her, and she felt the entire force of what he had been holding down unfold, carefully, into the space between them. Outside, the forest went on, the bond went on, and somewhere beneath Lena's thoughts, something that was not yet fully awake stretched its first limbs in the dark and opened its eyes. The first 3 days after the bite were the worst and the best of Lena's life, in equal and simultaneous measure. The worst, she cried twice and did not know why. Her senses were so heightened that the smell of coffee nearly knocked her down. She slept 14 hours the first day and woke reaching for Dorian before she was fully conscious, which terrified her more than the crying had. She could not be more than 30 feet from him without something in her chest tightening like a line pulled taut. The best, he was there for all of it. He brought her food and did not hover. He answered her questions with the same clear precision she had first noticed in his clinic chair. He sat beside her while she processed and did not try to fill the silences. When she needed to hold on to him, he let her, and when she needed space, he stepped back without being asked. "The instincts are going to be strong for the first weeks," he told her. "Especially the mate bond instincts. They won't hurt you, but they'll be louder than your own thoughts for a while." "Louder than clinical reasoning?" she asked. "Yes." A beat. "I know that's not comfortable for you." "Deeply uncomfortable," she agreed. She was sitting on his kitchen counter watching him cook, which was something she had apparently started doing without deciding to. "What is the instinct telling me right now?" He glanced at her. "You're watching exits." She blinked. "I am." New wolf response. Your wolf is mapping the territory. It will calm down once she knows the space is safe. He passed her a cup of tea without breaking stride. "She also wants to be closer to me than you would normally choose to be." "She," Lena repeated. "Your wolf is her own. She will have her own instincts, her own preferences. She and you are the same person, but you will feel her distinctly for a while." Lena thought about this. "And you're telling me she wants to be closer to you?" "Yes." "How close are we talking?" He met her eyes. Something in his expression was very carefully neutral. "I see," she said. "You don't have to." "I know." She hopped off the counter, crossed to him, stood in front of him, and tilted her face up, direct and clear as she was about everything. "The instinct and I agree on this one." He kissed her with the same deliberate care as the first time, and then, because she was different now, because the bond was complete and they both felt it like a physical reality with considerably less restraint. The first shift happened 4 days later. Not planned. Not on his timeline. She was in the backyard at dusk, watching the tree line when it started, a warmth in her spine, a feeling of expansion, of the world widening at its edges. She had 30 seconds of fear, genuine cold, the kind that comes from losing control of your own body. Then Dorian was there, his hands on her face, tilting her up to look at him. "Breathe," he said. "Look at me, breathe." She breathed. "Your wolf knows how to do this," he said. "Your mind needs to let her. Don't resist. Don't guide. Just trust." "I trust very few things," she said, somewhat breathlessly. "You trust me." A beat. "Yes," she said. "I do." She let go. The shift was beyond any words she had afterward, and she had words for most things. It was like finally finding the room she had been looking for in a house she had lived in for years. Her wolf was silver-gray, large for a newly turned female, with pale gold eyes that looked at Dorian and knew him in a way that was older than anything she could have taught herself. He was in his wolf form, in the space of a breath, massive, dark as the forest, with amber eyes that looked at her the same way his human eyes did, like she was everything he had been waiting for. She ran through the trees with him for 2 hours. She did not know she could run like that. She did not know anything could feel like that, wild and free and completely, entirely herself, in a way she had never been before. When they came back to human form at the edge of the yard, breathless and laughing, she was a different person than she had been that morning. Not less herself, more present, more real, more awake than she had ever managed to be. He pulled her close in the dark of the yard, and she pressed her face into his neck, and the bond hummed between them like something completed. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like myself," she said. "Finally." He held her tighter. They went inside. They did not sleep for a long time. The bond settled around them, like something ancient finally come home. Outside in the dark forest, neither of them noticed the truck parked on the logging road half a mile away, its engine cold, or the pale grey eyes watching the house through the trees. 11 days. Rogue Callahan had been counting. The morning began with coffee and the particular quiet of a house that had grown used to two people. Lena had stopped going home 4 days ago. The truth, and she had become more comfortable with truth since the transformation, was that the house on the forest edge had started to feel like the place where she lived, and her rental in Harrow Falls had started to feel like the place where she kept her mail. She was at the kitchen table with patient files when she heard Dorian come in from the yard. The small sound of his boots, the specific weight of his step. She had memorized his sounds. This was new. He came in carrying firewood and stopped when he saw her face. "What is it?" he asked. She looked up. "I heard someone on the logging road last night, around 2 in the morning. He set down the wood, very slowly. "I heard it too." "You didn't say anything." "I was going to." He met her eyes. "I thought I knew what it was. I was hoping I was wrong." She set down the file. "Tell me." He told her about Callahan, about the visit to her clinic, which she had already told him about, and which he had been quiet and careful about, in a way that had told her more than anger would have. About the 11 days. About what Callahan was, and what he might want. "He came to see me because I was your weakness," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment, then, "And you didn't tell the guards because you didn't want to extend your sentence." He looked at her. "I had 3 days. I couldn't." He stopped, restarted. "Every day I wasn't out was another day you were in that building without me knowing, without being able to." His jaw tightened. "No, I didn't handle it correctly. I know that." She looked at him for a long moment. This was who he was. The man who had chosen possession over patience, proximity over reason. She was not going to pretend she did not understand it. She did not entirely want him to change it. "What does he want?" she asked. "To destabilize me, to take something that's mine." His voice was flat. "It's a pack power play. It's about showing my pack that I can be touched." "Using me?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Then we should address it." His expression shifted. "Lena, I'm not going to hide," she said clearly. "I'm a new wolf, not a helpless one, and you are not going to spend the next week hovering in front of me. We figure out what he's going to do, and we address it." She met his eyes. "Together." He looked at her for a long time. "Together," he said. "Good." She picked up her file. "Now tell me what an Eastridge wolf can legally do on Harrow Pack territory, so I know what leverage we have." He told her. She listened. She asked 3 questions that made him look at her with that look again. The one she was beginning to understand was him realizing she was going to surprise him repeatedly for the rest of his life. 2 days later, Callahan was released from Harrow Falls. His truck was on their logging road that same night. Dorian stood at the back window with his arms crossed, looking at the dark tree line. "He's not coming in tonight," Dorian said. "No," Lena agreed. She was behind him, her hand between his shoulder blades, and she felt the controlled tension in him like a drawn wire. "He's making sure we know he's there. He's trying to rattle me." "Is it working?" A pause. "It's working on the wolf. The man is managing." She pressed her palm flat against his back. She stepped around him, put herself in front of him, tilted her face up. "Look at me," she said. He looked at her. His eyes were lit, deeper and hotter than usual. "I'm here," she said. "I'm fine. He hasn't done anything." "He will." "Maybe." She kept her eyes on his. "And when he does, we'll respond to what he actually does, not to the possibility of it." She put her hands on his chest. "You spent 3 years managing yourself. You can manage tonight." He exhaled slowly. His arms came around her with the care of someone choosing gentleness when every instinct said otherwise. He pressed his face into her hair. 3 days, he said quietly. "I thought 3 days would be enough time to get you clear of that building and figure out what came next. And instead you have an inexperienced wolf for a mate and a rival on your logging road. And instead I have you." He pulled back to look at her, which is not a complaint. She looked up at him, this man who had chosen patience and honesty and had been choosing her in every way available to him since before she knew what he was. She kissed him with intention, the kind of kiss that was a conversation, that said, "I see you, I'm here, not going anywhere." He kissed her back with the same intention and a great deal more fire. Outside, the truck sat unmoving in the dark. The moon rose over the Oregon trees and lit the clearing silver. Inside, neither of them was thinking about Callahan anymore. The morning arrived white and cold, frost on the windows, the smell of snow coming. Lena had been awake for 20 minutes, watching the ceiling, listening to Dorian breathe beside her. She had started doing this in the past week, cataloguing the quality of his sleep, the steadiness of his breathing, the specific weight of an arm thrown across her in the night. She was not anxious about it. She was just noting. She was going to be a mother. She had known for 3 days. Her changed physiology had made it obvious to her body before any test could confirm it, and she had confirmed it anyway because she was a physician, and anecdotal internal evidence was not the same as a result. She had done the math. She understood the timeline. She also understood because she had asked him and he had answered with the unhurried honesty that was his constant, that wolf pregnancies follow different rules than human ones. Faster, stronger. The children would be born knowing what they were. She had not told him yet, not because she was afraid of his response. She knew his response. She had been working out how to organize her own. "You're thinking very loudly," he said, without opening his eyes. She looked at him. The arm across her tightened slightly. "I have something to tell you," she said. He opened his eyes, turned his head to look at her. The morning was quiet around them. "Tell me," he said. She told him. The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds, and then he had sat up and gathered her against him with a completeness of feeling that she had only seen from him once before, the night of her bite, when he had held her through the change and she had heard him say her name against her hair. He did not say anything for a long time. She felt his heart under her ear. "Dorian," she said. "I know," he said. His voice was the opposite of rough. It was the voice of a man who has just discovered that the world is bigger than he knew. "I know. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. "I had almost stopped believing this was something I was going to have." She held on. She was very good at holding on. "I need you to understand," he said, "that I'm going to be possessive about this. About you. About this." His arms held her carefully, as though calibrating. "More than I already am. I want you to tell me if it becomes too much. You've been remarkably not too much," she said. "I'm going to test that." "I know." She tilted her face up to look at him. "I'm also going to tell you when you need to step back, and you're going to listen." "Yes," he said, immediately and without qualification. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Good," she said. He kissed her slowly, carefully, with the weight of everything the morning had just become. The bond between them settled into something new, something that contained 3 lives now, and knew it. 3 hours later, Callahan walked to the front door. Lena felt him before she heard him, the specific wrongness on the edge of her wolf's awareness, the thing that did not belong on Dorian's territory. She was in the kitchen, and she went still, and Dorian, reading her the way he read everything about her, was at the door in 4 seconds. She came to stand behind him. Slightly to the left, not hiding, but positioned the way she had started doing without being taught. Callahan stood on the front step. He looked at Dorian, then at Lena, and the calculation in his grey eyes was very clear. "Vex," he said. "Callahan." Dorian's voice was perfectly level. "You're on my territory. Easy. Social call." His eyes moved to Lena again and stayed there, which was its own message. "Just wanted to see how the doctor was settling in." Lena met his gaze directly. She did not look away. "She's settled," Dorian said. Callahan's eyes moved back to Dorian. "Is she? Seems like a lot to ask of a civilian. New wolf, new world." He smiled, and it did not reach the grey eyes. "If she ever wants a more gradual introduction to pack life." "She doesn't," Lena said. Callahan looked at her. She looked back. "Dr. Voss," he said pleasantly, like they were still in the clinic. "Right now, I'm telling you that you're on someone else's ground, and you've delivered your message and it's time to leave," she said. A beat. Something moved behind his eyes. Reassessment. He had not expected her to speak. "The new ones are always eager," he said to Dorian. Dorian took 1 step forward, just one, but it was the step of an alpha, and the weight of it changed the air. "Leave, Callahan. Now." Callahan held for 1 more second, long enough to be deliberate, and then turned and walked back down the path. He did not run. He did not rush, but he left. The door closed. Lena let out a breath. Dorian turned. His hands came to her face, large, warm, checking her over with an urgency he was working to contain. "Are you all right?" "Yes." She covered his hands with hers. "He was testing, seeing if I'd respond, seeing if you'd react." "I know." "He's going to come back." "I know." His eyes moved over her face. "Lena." "I know," she said back to him before he could say the protective thing, the worried thing. "I know, and we're going to handle it." She pressed her hands flat against his chest. "But not tonight. Tonight we eat dinner, and you teach me about packed territories, and then I'm going to sleep, because I'm apparently building additional humans, and it's exhausting." His face did the thing she loved best, the full, real smile, the one that was still new enough to be startling. He pulled her in. "Deal," he said. "There are things a new wolf discovers slowly, that rain sounds different now, layered with information, that her own reflection has changed in ways that are hard to name, that sleep is deeper and dreams are older, full of running and trees and the smell of pine and something ancestral that has no human word. And there are things a new wolf discovers quickly, like how it felt when someone threatened what was hers." Lena had not anticipated the ferocity of it. She had anticipated the protective instinct. She was carrying children. She was a new wolf. The literature was clear about maternal bond dynamics in pack species. She had read what Dorian had given her, absorbed it with the same organized attention she gave everything, and believed she had prepared. She had not prepared for the specific sensation of Callahan standing in her doorway and looking at her mate like she was not there. The wolf had gone very, very quiet. The quiet was worse than noise. She had not said anything about it that night. She had eaten dinner and listened to Dorian talk about territories and gone to bed and lain in the dark processing it. And in the morning she said, "I need you to tell me more about what Callahan is actually capable of." He told her. He told her about the Eastridge Pack, about their tactics, about what a rival alpha wanted when he moved against an established pack. He was thorough and direct, the way he was about everything, and he watched her while he talked with the specific attention of a man tracking her reactions. "He's going to try something physical," she said when he finished. "Yes." "Against you?" "Yes." She was quiet. "And pack law, is there anything that governs this?" "Challenge law. An alpha can be challenged on his territory. The outcome settles the claim." He met her eyes. "I can handle Callahan." "I know you can." She held his gaze. "I need to know what my role is in this. Not because I don't trust you, because I need to know." He looked at her for a long time. "Your role," he said finally, "is to be safe, whatever happens." "That's not a role. That's a location." "Lena, I'm a wolf," she said. "I'm your wolf. I have a wolf who would like very much to be more than a location." She kept her voice steady and her eyes clear. "I understand that you want to protect me. I understand that the instinct is enormous right now, but I'm not going to be put somewhere safe while something happens to you." He was very still. "Tell me what I can actually do," she said, "and I'll prepare for that. Not for a version of this where I'm somewhere else." The silence ran between them. Outside the window, the forest was grey and moving. "You're a new wolf," he said. "I know. You've never been in a challenge situation. I know. Your wolf's instincts are strong but untrained. Also true. And you're pregnant. Aware. Which is," she said, "precisely why I am not going to be somewhere I can't see what's happening." He exhaled. He pushed a hand through his hair. He looked at her with the specific expression of a man who is losing an argument he knew he was going to lose, and who finds underneath the frustration that he loves her for it. "You stay close," he said. "On the line, not past it. You don't engage unless I have to," she said. "Unless you have to," he agreed, and the word carried the weight of what they both knew, that she would know. She nodded. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I spent 3 years thinking about how to protect you before I even knew you were mine," he said quietly. "Now you're here and I know. And the instinct is not rational, Lena. It's not about whether you're capable. I know." She turned her hand over, held his. "And I'm asking you to let me stand next to you." He looked at her hand in his. At the mark at her shoulder, his mark that had healed clean, and that she had, after the first day, stopped covering. "Next to me," he said. "Next to you," she confirmed. He brought her hand to his mouth, pressed his lips to her knuckles. "All right," he said. 3 nights later, the challenge came. It was 2 in the morning. Callahan was not alone. He had brought 2 Eastridge wolves with him, a flanking move, a show of numbers. They came through the tree line at the back of the property, and Dorian was on his feet before they cleared the brush, and Lena was behind him and slightly to the left, and her wolf was absolutely silent. Callahan stood in the clearing. He looked at Dorian, and then, deliberately, measuredly, he looked at Lena. "Let's settle this, Vex," he said. Dorian walked forward to meet him. It was fast and precise. 2 alphas who knew what they were doing, Dorian with the particular ferocity of a man protecting something irreplaceable. The 2 flanking wolves held back, watching. Lena watched. Her wolf was still. Then one of the flanking wolves moved, not toward Dorian, toward her, and the wolf that had been still inside her was no longer still at all. She shifted in the space of a breath. Silver gray in the dark clearing, eyes like winter light. The wolf that had moved toward her stopped. She did not act aggressively. She simply placed herself very deliberately between the wolf and the direction of Dorian, and she stood there and let the wolf in her show clearly in her eyes. "This is mine." That was all, clear and complete and without any ambiguity whatsoever. The flanking wolf stepped back. In the clearing, Callahan had gone still too. He had seen, and that moment of distraction was the moment Dorian needed. Not to cause harm, to end. One clean, controlled movement that put Callahan on the ground and made it clear, without ambiguity, that the challenge was finished. Callahan lay in the frost and looked up at the sky for a long moment. "Done," Dorian said. His voice was even. Callahan looked at Lena. Something moved in his grey eyes, not quite what she expected. Not anger, but a realization. The specific look of someone who has made an error in their assessment. "Done," he said. The morning after the challenge, Lena woke to find Dorian already awake, watching her. She was used to this, his watching, which was nothing like surveillance and everything like someone who had gone a long time without something to look at and intended to make the most of the access. But this morning, his expression was different, quieter. Something in it she identified after a moment as awe. "What?" she said. "Last night," he said. "Last night was last night." She sat up, checked herself by habit. Everything fine. The twins moving with the faint interior presence she had grown used to. "Is Callahan gone?" "He left at first light, all three of them." She nodded, looked at Dorian. He was looking at her with that expression, and she felt the warmth of it. "I told you," she said. "I told you to let me stand next to you." "You did?" His voice was quiet. "I didn't fully understand what that meant." "Now you do." "Now I do." He moved across the bed and kissed her forehead slowly, with weight. "Lena." "Don't make it ceremonial," she said. "I'm still in last night's clothes." He made a sound against her hair that was almost a laugh. She pulled back to look at him. "It's not over," she said. "I know. He'll regroup. Maybe come back with more." Maybe." He met her eyes. Or maybe he understood what he saw. She thought about the expression on Callahan's face in the clearing, the realization. He didn't expect me to shift. "No one expects the new wolf to be the one who holds the line," Dorian said. "Most new wolves are overwhelmed. It takes time to be steady." She thought about what had happened inside her when the flanking wolf moved, the absolute, clarifying simplicity of it. "These are mine." "I wasn't overwhelmed," she said. "I was just very clear." "Yes." Something moved across his face. Pride. "You were." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the spider." A pause. "The bite." "The bite." She was quiet for a moment. "The venom was still in my system when you bit me. Diluted and neutralizing, but there. My wolf carries traces of it. I can feel it, different from other wolves' sense of self." She was working this out as she said it, the way she worked out clinical problems. "It's not harming me, but it's there." He was listening with the focused attention he gave her when she was thinking. "Callahan is a wolf," she said. "His metabolism processes things the way ours does." She lifted her head to look at Dorian. "I could use it, not lethally, not even close to lethally, but enough to incapacitate." Dorian looked at her for a long moment. "You've been thinking about this since last night. Since 3 nights ago, actually." He absorbed this. "How?" She told him it was a clinical plan, precise, targeted, exit condition defined. She had spent the past 3 days calculating concentrations, pathways, the specific physiology of an experienced wolf versus a newly turned one. It was the work of a physician who had decided to apply her skills to an entirely new domain. When she finished, he was quiet. "You terrify me sometimes," he said, with no indication that he considered this a problem. "I'm trying to protect my family," she said plainly. His arm tightened around her. "I know," he said, "and I need you to know I would handle Callahan. I handled him last night. You don't have to. I'm not doing it because I have to, she said. I'm doing it because I want to be the one who ends this. She met his eyes. He came for me first. He went to my clinic. He looked at me like I was a resource rather than a person. He came to your house in the middle of the night. He chose to make this about me. I'd like to finish what he started. The silence held for a moment. All right, Dorian said. All right, she confirmed. Callahan came back 5 days later. He came alone this time, which told her that the challenge loss had cost him with his own pack, and that this was now personal rather than tactical. He came to the front door at dusk, and she answered it herself. Dorian was behind her, a half step, close enough to move. He stayed there. Callahan looked at her. Something in his eyes had changed since the clearing. The calculated quality was gone. What was left was simpler and less interesting. Vex isn't going to protect you forever, he said. He doesn't need to, she said. She kept her voice even, her hands at her sides, her wolf entirely quiet, in the way that preceded absolute action. I protect myself. He moved to push past her. She met his arm with a grip that surprised him. She saw it in his face, and held. One touch, one moment of contact with skin. He felt it after 3 seconds, blinked, looked at his arm. Spider venom, she said pleasantly, distilled and concentrated by wolf metabolism and applied through contact. You won't transform. You won't be permanently affected. You're going to be very uncomfortable for approximately 16 hours. She met his eyes. You don't become a wolf twice. He stared at her. Leave, she said, and don't come back. I know what you are, and I know how to make it very unpleasant for you. That's a better outcome than you deserve. He left. He walked down the path and got in his truck and drove away, and he did not come back. Dorian closed the door. He turned to look at her. She turned to look at him. You don't become a wolf twice, he said. I liked it, she said. He crossed the room and kissed her with the particular intensity of a man who has just watched the person he loves be exactly who she is. I liked it too, he said against her mouth. November became December, and the Oregon forest became something from another world. Frost on the fern line, snow on the high ridges, the smell of cold pine and wood smoke constant in the air. The days grew short, and the nights grew long, and Lena discovered that she loved winter in this forest in a way she had not loved any season in any previous version of her life. She was not going back to the facility. She had thought about this carefully, as she thought about everything carefully, and she had called the facility's administrator on a Tuesday and submitted her resignation with 2 weeks' notice and sufficient documentation to ensure the continuity of patient care. The administrator had been surprised. She had been professional, brief and final. She had her license. She had her skills. She had already begun conversations with the Harrowpack's 3 families who lived nearest to the forest, who needed health care, who had children, who were the living network of a community that existed quietly alongside the human one. There was work here that she was uniquely positioned to do, and it was better work, she thought, than any she had done before. She told Dorian that evening. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, I didn't ask you to do that. I know. I would never ask you to give up. I know. She looked at him directly. This is what I want. I'm not giving anything up. I'm choosing something. She held his gaze. There's a difference. He looked at her for a long time. Yes, he said, there is. She moved to him. He pulled her in. I want to make sure you understand, she said against his chest, that I see the distinction between choosing and being claimed. I know the distinction. You're possessive. I know. I'm not going to stop mentioning it when it matters. I know. His arms tightened. I'm going to spend the rest of our lives being grateful for it. She smiled into his shirt. The twins, she was already calling them that, The small presences she could sense with increasing clarity were growing with the speed of wolf genetics. She was a physician, and she was monitoring herself with the organized attention she gave everything. But she was also, increasingly, simply present in the feeling of it, of the fullness of it, of days that were entirely different from any she had imagined having. She had not imagined having them. She had not told herself the story of what her life would look like, because that story had seemed, for most of her adult life, like something she could not afford to get wrong by wanting too specifically. She had been wrong about that. It turned out that wanting specifically was the entire point. The pack began coming to the house, not formally. There was no ceremony, no announcement. But the families who lived in the woods began arriving on various pretexts. A neighbor with a child who had a persistent cough, a young couple with questions about what to expect from a first pregnancy, a pack elder who sat with her in the kitchen for 2 hours and talked about what it meant to have a Luna again. What it means, the elder said, is that the alpha has someone to hold him still, someone he will listen to when he won't listen to himself. The old woman looked at Lena steadily. Does he listen to you? When I make him, Lena said. The elder smiled. Good, that's the way. Dorian came home that evening to find his kitchen occupied by 3 pack families and his mate in the middle of an argument about prenatal vitamins that she appeared to be winning handily. He stood in the doorway. She looked up at him across the room, across the warmth and the noise and the specific chaos of a home that had opened itself. He looked at her. The bond between them was quiet, in the way of something that had settled into its permanent shape. Not less, it had never been less, but deeper, steadier. The kind of certainty that did not need to be loud because it was not going anywhere. She crossed the kitchen to him. He put his arms around her. How was the North Ridge? She asked. Cold. He pressed his mouth to her hair. You've been busy. Someone has to keep this pack from giving each other terrible medical advice. She looked up at him. You look tired. I'm not. You are. I can see it. She put her hand against his face. He turned into it, just slightly, like a man allowing himself a small rest. Go say hello to everyone, and then we're going to eat, and you're going to sleep. I was going to do the Eastern. Tomorrow, she said firmly. He looked at her. Tomorrow, he said. She went back to the vitamins argument. He watched her for a moment, her certainty, her directness, the way she moved through his world like she had always been in it. And the thing in his chest that had been quiet for years, and then not quiet, and then something so large he had not had words for it settled into what it had always been going to be, home. Just that, just the simplest thing. He went to say hello to his pack. The night the twins were born, it snowed. Lena had known for 2 days. She had known her own body with a precision that had only increased since the transformation. She had prepared with the focused efficiency she brought to everything. She had called the pack elder who had obstetric experience. She had made sure the house was stocked and warm. She had told Dorian 4 separate times with increasing directness that his role in this was to be present, calm, and do exactly what she told him. He had said yes to all of it. He had also, upon the first sign that it was actually happening, been magnificent and solid, and exactly what she needed, which did not surprise her, and which she told him afterward, when she was too tired for anything but the truth. Their daughter arrived first, small and already opinionated, announcing herself to the Oregon night with a voice that carried. Their son followed 6 minutes later, quieter, with his father's amber eyes already open and looking around the room like a person who had arrived with a prior commitment to pay attention. Dorian held his daughter. He was very still. His hands were large and careful, and the expression on his face was one Lena had never seen before, so open it was almost painful to look at. She looked at it anyway. She was going to keep looking at it. Hey, she said quietly. He looked at her. His eyes were bright in the way they got when something was too big for the ordinary face to contain. "Hey," he said. She held their son. He had stopped looking around the room and was now looking at her specifically, with a focused attention that reminded her of a certain pair of amber eyes in a prison clinic, seeing her for the first time. "I know," she told him. "I know." He made a sound that was the smallest beginning of understanding. Later, much later, after the elder had gone and the house was quiet and both children were sleeping, she lay in the dark beside Dorian and listened to 4 heartbeats. She had spent her whole life calibrating, measuring, managing the variables. She had been good at it. She had been within the limits of what she had allowed herself, successful. She had not known what she was managing toward. She had not known that the measuring had been waiting for something to measure that actually mattered. "Tell me something," she said. He was almost asleep. She could feel it in him, the deep exhaustion of a day that had rearranged the world. "Tell you what? Anything. Whatever you're thinking." A pause. The snow was still falling, very softly. Outside, the forest held the house the way it always did, ancient and reliable and entirely unconcerned with the lives inside. "I'm thinking," he said, "about a Tuesday in November." She felt the smile before she finished forming it. "When you walked into my clinic bleeding." "When I walked into your clinic bleeding." His voice had the texture she had first heard and never quite recovered from. "And you touched my arm, and everything became very clear." "Tell me what was clear," she said. "You," he said, "just you." The most important thing I had ever understood in my life, and I had understood it in the space of about 4 seconds, and I had no framework for it whatsoever, and I was sitting in a clinic being sutured while trying not to do anything that would communicate the full scope of what I was experiencing. "Is that why you grabbed my wrist?" "Yes." She thought about that. "You were calm. I was not calm." The smallest sound that was not quite a laugh. I was the furthest from calm I had been in years. I was holding very still around something enormous. She reached for his hand in the dark. He took it. "I felt it too," she said. "I told myself I didn't know what it was. I knew what it was." He was quiet for a moment. His thumb moved over her knuckles. "I would have waited," he said. "If you'd needed more time, I would have waited as long as you needed." "I know." She pressed her face into his shoulder. "That's part of why I didn't need more time." The children breathed. The snow fell. The bond between them had the quality of something that had been looking for its permanent home for a very long time and had finally found it. "Dorian," she said. "Lena," he said back. Neither of them said anything else for a long time, because everything that needed saying had been said in one form or another, since a Tuesday in November when a pair of amber eyes looked at a woman who did not know what she was about to become and recognized her and waited. That was the beginning. This was the rest. If this story is pulling you under, type Thornvale in the comments and let us know where you are watching from. Subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss a single part. The bond is just getting started.